Okay. All right, everybody. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off our lesson. Of course, I know we've been talking about the things, that events and different things that were leading up to the American Revolution, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're going to start with is we're going to start with a little bell ringer activity. But what I did is I put everything in a packet. So this is what we're going to start with first is our bell ringer, which is, let me go ahead and pull it up so y'all can see it. All right, that's what it's gonna be talking about is what did the petition, because who remembers what petition means? Who? Yeah. A petition or a, what's another word for, let's see if we can just scroll through the to where I have our vocabulary on here. What does it say? What's the keyword that stands out in that? It's a request. It's like a formal written request, right? Okay. So what y'all are going to answer is what did that petition or that written request that the delegates, or what did we say? What is a delegate? Who knows what a delegate is? Yes, sir.
Something whale.
Well, a delegate. That's a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And yes, sir. They're a what now? Well, let's just talk about it a little bit more. A delegate actually it's a person, and it's the people that they chose to go to the Continental Congress, right? Because remember that the Continental Congress, when y'all talked about the first Continental Congress, do y'all remember talking about that?
Yes.
Okay, and that at that point they had picked delegates or people that they chose to go to this. It's basically like a meeting, right? To create. It says to create. Or whoops! I just lost my train of thought. So let's just start from the beginning again. What did the petition that the delegates of the Second Continental Congress create? And you need to state or create or want to say to the British King. So basically, all I'm going to want you to do is just tell me in a couple sentences maybe, what did they come up with? What ideas did they come up with? And what were they trying to tell the British King about how they felt about all of the laws and different things that were happening? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so it says first page in your packet. So just go ahead and I'm going to give y'all a few minutes. I'm going to set a timer for y'all to go ahead and write your thoughts. Just one or two sentences would be enough. Just explaining what the colonists wrote or wanted to write to the British King about what was happening. Because remember, what were the colonists wanting to try to do in all this process? What were they wanting to do?
They wanted to tell the king they want freedom.
They wanted their what?
Right.
They wanted their freedom, right?
Yeah.
Y'all are on the right track. Huh? Oh, you don't have another? I'll grab you one. Here you go. Yeah, just the first page right now. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just give y'all just a few minutes, okay? What's the main thing that Miss Page always tells y'all when y'all are writing those short response questions? What's the first thing you're supposed to do? You're supposed to do what? What's the R?
Circle the answer question. The question word.
Y'all remember. Good job. That's really good. That I am already seeing that a lot of y'all had went to that at the very beginning.
And we have to move around the question words.
Right. Because you basically, when you're restating, you're doing what? You're changing it from a question to a what?
Answer.
A what?
Answer.
Well, you're going to give an answer, but you're going to change it from a question to a statement, right? You're going to change it by, a lot of times you can do it like that by pulling out some of those what I call question words, right? Start getting finished with that, and we'll just move on to the next thing. And all you'll need to do is just turn to that second page of your packet. When you're done, just go ahead and turn to the second page of your packet. And you don't have to do anything with that just yet, because we're going to talk about some other parts of the lesson first before we get to that. But that way you're ready when we get to it. Yes, sir.
Can I read the first paragraph?
You can quietly if you want to, but we're fixing to go on to the next thing, and we're going to have an opportunity to go through that in just a second. Okay, so let's go ahead and look up here at the board and kind of talk a little bit more. First thing we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about our objective, or what we're going to learn. Now, I kind of changed it up a little bit, but yes, sorry. I thought I was go back to the PC.
Go home. HDMI 2, and then the black screen.
Because I can write on it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, so I kind of had changed up a little bit of our objective, so let me kind of just do that real quick. So let's see. Keith, do you want to lead the objective? Come up here. here and lead it. I did kind of make a little bit of some adjustments, but you want to stand, or at least stand up. Just stand up where you're at, and you can lead everybody saying it. Can you just go ahead and stand up, Keith? Okay, so let's all say it together. Okay. The learner will identify supporting details and answer questions related to the battles of Bunker Hill and Lexington and Concord to the colonists' changing views about themselves. 80% accuracy on this test. That just means that's just how we measure how well you do on something, okay? Thank you, Keith. You can have a seat. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and just look at the next thing. That's just, we were just talking about what we're going to learn in our lesson today, okay? And so y'all know the kind of the big question that y'all have been talking about when you've been talking about the American Revolution in these previous lessons. You've been talking about how, and why. Those are those big words that are important words that you can use to help you figure out what details or what information you need to pull out of all of your learning to answer the question. So how and why did the colonists' attitudes and views of themselves and Great Britain begin to change? So that's the big thing. That's the big thing y'all are learning about in this lesson, right? Okay. So let's look at we're going to kind of trim that down a little bit and talk a little bit more. That's just the big overall thing, right? Just think it's a big, like your big idea. So something that we kind of wonder about, this is more specifically in this aspect of the lesson is we're going to talk about how did they view themselves? So that's another one of those question words. How did the Americans view themselves after the Battle of Bunker Hill? What's another important word do you think in that question? Yes, sir. What's that?
Did.
Well, that is an important word, but what's a word in that statement or question that would tell you like where you're looking for this information?
Did.
Yes.
Bunker Hill?
Yeah, well that tells you what? That tells you about like what particular battle, right? But what's another important one? Well, that kind of goes along with what she said, the Battle of Bunker Hill, but how about this? How about after? Because I know y'all have talked about a lot of things about how the colonists felt about themselves or about the king before certain events happened and then after certain events happened. That kind of gives you an idea of like how those particular events or those different, battles or whatever you're talking about, how they affected what was going on in that situation and what kind of role that they played in the American Revolution coming about, and then what did, at the end of it, later on, y'all will learn about how, not only about the American Revolution, but how that American Revolution, it led to what? The whole creation of the United States, right? Okay. So, how do y'all think that the colonists viewed themselves? Well, after that's one of our key words again. How and after the First Continental Congress, how do y'all think that they viewed themselves? They what? What'd you say? I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. They were disappointed. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
I found another one. Keyword Continental Congress.
That's right. And which Continental Congress was it?
The first one.
The first one, right? So okay. So that was a good. Yeah, that's good that you picked up on those details right there, because those details help you to not only understand what they're asking you, it helps you to know where to look to find the information you're looking for, right? So when they asked you that question, so I know you said that they were disappointed. Well, they were, they probably did feel disappointed, but how do you think that they think thought about themselves, did they think of themselves as a whole country, or did they think of themselves as individual countries, like individual? What do you think? They were thinking that they were thinking of themselves as, they were actually not really individuals just yet. They were individual colonies, but they thought of themselves as what? Part of what did they include themselves in? Part of the what? Who was there? Remember you talked about the mother country? Who was the mother countries?
Oh, I think Britain.
Great Britain, yeah, Great Britain. So they thought of themselves as what? 13 individual colonies that was part of the bigger, like the relationship with with Great Britain, that mother country, right? So they still connected themselves with Great Britain, right? Okay. So that's giving you kind of a way to kind of think about kind of where the colonists, what they were thinking, and how, and when you understand kind of what they were thinking and how they felt about their place and how they felt about the things that were happening at that time, it helps you to understand why they're doing the things that they're doing, right? Do you think that by looking at people's actions that it can help you understand, like, I know you probably talked about in ELA about point of view, and that's basically you can take somebody's actions and kind of look at those to see what their point of view and why, what they're feeling and why they're doing what they're doing, okay? Okay, so let's see. So I've got a short video. Hopefully my link works. It's about the Battle of Bunker Hill, which y'all are going to learn. Have y'all talked about that a little bit, the Battle of Bunker Hill already? Mm-hmm. Not yet? Okay, well y'all are we'll talk about that some today, and then y'all will learn some more about it. I know how it's connected in future lessons. Let's see if I can get it.
Battles of America, Bunker Hill. In April of 1775, the battles of Lexington and Concord ended. The colonials followed the British back to Boston, Massachusetts, and laid siege on the city with a low supply of cannons, firearms, and artillery. Recognizing the need to control access to Boston Harbor, the British planned to occupy Bunker Hill and Breeds Hill. After catching wind of the British plan, 1,200 colonials under the command of William Prescott rushed to the hill and built fortifications during the night. On the morning of June 17, 1775, the British awoke to find the colonials already occupying the hills. The British forces, confident in their superior training and equipment, expected to take the hills with relative ease. Led by Commander William Howe, the British dispatched 2,400 troops toward Breeds Hill. As the colonials were preparing for battle, Dr. Joseph Warren joined the fight and was given command of the troops. However, he turned it down and fought alongside the others, as to him, it was a privilege to serve under General Prescott. Because of the shortage of ammunition, the colonial militia was given the famous order, "Hold your fire until you see the whites of their eyes," in order to maximize British casualties. The resourceful colonials thwarted the first two British assaults, inflicting significant casualties on the Redcoats. However, now depleted of ammunition, the Americans were forced to retreat during the third onslaught, giving the British a tactical victory. While the Americans sustained a fair amount of casualties, including Dr. Joseph Warren, the British amassed thousands of casualties, which sent a clear message that the colonial militia was a force to be reckoned with. Despite the technical victory for the British, the conflict seemed more like a defeat. Almost half of their soldiers on that day were killed or wounded. The Battle of Bunker Hill, actually fought mainly on Breeds Hill, greatly boosted the confidence of the undertrained and poorly supplied American forces. Despite being outnumbered, the Americans stood up to the best the British had to offer and lived to fight another day. The promise of independence and liberty remained alive and well, sustained and bolstered by the victory at Bunker Hill.
If you enjoyed this video and all of our videos, please consider a tax-deductible donation so we can keep the whole thing free for you. I'm Dr. Duke. Thanks for watching.
All right. was just a short video about the Battle of Bunker Hill. And I kind of was giving you a little bit of information about what was happening, what happened at that time, and then open our PowerPoint. Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one. So that was just a little bit about that particular battle. So do y'all think what did it sound like in that battle that the colonists or the Americans, how their army was compared to the British army? What by watching that video, what did you learn about the army? What about the British army? Tell me about what you thought about the British army.
The British army would have a lot of guns and a lot of people died.
Yeah, there was a lot of people that died, but that was an important detail that you came up with about that they were they had lots of ammunition, right? Altria.
This time,
You picked up on that already. Okay. Well, tell me what about the Americans or the colonists? What did you find out about that? What did you learn about them? About their army specifically.
They almost won the battle, but the British won.
They did win. So who was the bigger? Like if we look at, let's see. So who do you think was the bigger army? Let's look at the numbers right here. So this is the American militia or the army, because remember when we talked about the militia, right? That was what? An organized group of citizens, right? They weren't necessarily trained military soldiers. They were people that lived in the colony that volunteered to fight, right? Okay, they're the ones who made up this army that went to fight. Okay, and then but the British soldiers, those were trained soldiers that were basically, you could say they were professional soldiers compared to the amateur militia, right? So who was bigger? If you look at the numbers, here's the Americans right here, and this is the British. Who had the bigger group of?
The British soldiers.
The British. But even though they were bigger, they were what? They were able to, even though the British was bigger than the Americans, what were the Americans able to do? They were actually they didn't win, but they were able to what? What do you think?
Take down some of the soldiers.
They were able to, yes, they were able to take down some of those British soldiers, and they were able to probably, how do you think that they kind of made those British soldiers and the people that ran the British army, what do you think that they kind of, with that battle, how they made them feel? Or they probably, and they were probably a little bit maybe scared. Do you think that they were a little bit scared?
No.
Yeah, because they weren't expecting this amateur group of colonists to come together and try to even make a dent in their army, right? Because at that time, they were the British Army was one of the most powerful armies in all of the world. Not just that area, but of all the world, okay? So that's saying a lot, isn't it? That's really saying a lot about who they were. So let's I want y'all to turn to the page in your packet that's going to look like this right here. It's about an account of Bunker Hill that somebody wrote. It's called the Committee of Safety's account of the Battle of Bunker Hill. It's something, and when they say that, basically it's after that battle happened, somebody wrote something, a report about what happened. So it's not that second page. Y'all are not on that second page. You should be on, I think it's the third page. Yes, you're on the third page. It looks like this. Okay, and let's just go ahead and I would underline the title of it so you understand what you're looking at and where that information is coming from. So I would just underline that, because that's something that's really important. And then basically it's just documenting the battle and what happened. When they say aftermath, it's something that happened afterward, right? Okay, so just follow along with me while we read it, okay? You should have your finger right there on that first word right there and ready. Okay, is everybody ready? Y'all ready? Okay. The British soldiers had won on this day. It does not help them against the American army, which is now hiding on a nearby hill. The American soldiers want to keep fighting. They would rather win their freedom and peace, those are important things, right, without killing any more people. But if they have to fight, they would rather die than lose their freedom. So they would rather die than lose their freedom. So before it's too late, the British should be smart and tell their soldiers to stop fighting. They need to end this unfair and unjust war, and they should also stop thinking that they have the right to tax us. If they want to continue to rule the colonies, they will lose. So they're basically, the person that wrote this account, his name was Samuel Freeman, it says right here, by Samuel Freeman. He was basically, what do y'all think that he was telling people? What do you think he was telling people about this battle and what he thinks should come out of it, or what the British should do afterwards? You want to think about it? You can think about it. Okay, go ahead, Ashley. They should stop, right? He was basically telling them that what they're doing by taxing them and doing all the things that they're doing to the colonists is not fair or just, and that they need to stop. That way, not only that no more American soldiers die or American colonists die, but that no more British soldiers die, right? So he's basically telling them that, what would you think would be an important note to put on there? That he thinks that the war is what? What does it say right here? That the war is what? Okay, so the war was what? Unfair and unjust. So when they're talking about something being unfair and unjust, that means, what do y'all think that means? I know you wouldn't know what unfair means, but if something is unjust, what do you think that means?
It's not good. It's not fair.
Well, if you look at this word, look at that word just. You can kind of break them up, your words apart, to kind of give you an idea. Think about the word. If I say, I can justify this war, what do you all think that means? Does anybody know what that means? If I say, I'm going to justify my actions, or justify the war.
You're going to have justice in the war?
It's related to that, yes. Go ahead. Well, not, maybe if you say adjust, maybe then that would be more appropriate. But I would say, if I say I can justify something, I can back it up, and I have real reasons and proof, basically, to say that I have the right for this to happen, right? It's okay. So that he was basically saying that the war was unfair and unjust. So it wasn't right. It wasn't fair, or they shouldn't be doing this to the colonists, right? Why do you think Britain was doing this to the colonists?
Okay.
They were trying to have what over the colonists?
Rule.
They rule and what? Or they were trying to do what?
Freedom. If
somebody is telling you all these things, all these different rules and all these things that they want you to do, and you don't think that they don't seem like they're very fair and that they're not necessary, you can say they're trying to do what to you? They're trying to, like, control you, right? Do you think they're trying to control you? Do you think that that's what Britain was trying to do?
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I would be thinking too, okay? All right. So let's look at, let's go ahead and look at some of the vocabulary, which we talked about, we basically talked about this in our reading, so let's just kind of review it real quick. Again, the militia is important to this and future lessons, because it talks about the people or the group of citizens that were formed in order to what? To help fight for the
Freedom.
colonists. What? That's right. Try to fight for their freedom. They were an organized group of citizens that defend a community, or they call them like part-time soldiers because they weren't trained. They weren't like professional soldiers, right? And then we talked about a petition was a formal written request, right? And then the delegates, when we were talking about what was does that vocabulary word relate to? What the delegates to the what? What event or what thing that was going on during this time does that relate to when we talked about the delegates? That they sent delegates to what? The first what? The first continental what? Congress. The first Continental Congress. That's right. That's the important thing. They chose those people, or they were people who were chosen to make decisions for another group of people. So if I have a delegate, that's somebody that they have chosen to go somewhere and help make decisions for a bigger group of people. So those were people that went to the Continental Congress to help make decisions for the bigger group of colonies, right? Okay. So does anybody have any questions about any of those vocabulary? Yes. What's your question?
How many times they have to take a break before they have to prepare for the war?
How many times did they have to what?
Take a break.
I don't know the exact answer to that question, but I bet you we could look it up to try to find out about it. Maybe later we can look it up and see what we can find about it. Because there's all kinds of different laws and different acts and wars and battles and stuff that was going on and different things that happened in between, right? Yes, sir. Which question?
What time do they eat?
Oh, I really don't know. Probably different times. I'm not really sure. Okay. But those are just keep those vocabulary words in mind in the different parts of the lesson, okay? So now we're at the point, like I know that Battle of Bunker Hill, we kind of jumped a little ahead and was talking about that happening. So let's talk some more about how that battle, how it was helping them to prepare for the bigger event of the war, right? Because we talked about, remember those key words, before and after? So when they were preparing to go to the big war, because that Bunker Hill was, remember, it was an individual smaller battle within the bigger war, right? Okay, so before, okay, the First Continental Congress, each of the colonies, we talked about how they viewed themselves as separate colonies or separate nations, but after, how did they view themselves? What did we say, how the events that happened, those battles, how that changed how they thought about who they were as a country? So after they went through these battles, they kind of did what? It helped them to get what, do you think?
They had to get freedom from the king.
They were trying to get freedom, but they started to have what, more confidence, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they had the ability to be able to.
But they didn't get the freedom because they
Not
died.
yet. Not yet. That's jumping a little ahead, isn't it? They haven't got to that point yet. But after they went through these different events, like the First Continental Congress, and then later on y'all will talk about the Second Continental Congress. But after all of this stuff happened, they eventually, it helped them to get that confidence, but then they also helped them think about themselves in the way that they were a whole nation. Like they weren't necessarily they weren't wanting to be part of that big country of Great Britain, right? Of that mother country. They were wanting to be their own united nation, right? And they had that common enemy. Who do y'all think that their common enemy was?
The king.
The king, and what else?
The British.
The British, the Parliament. Because what did we say the Parliament was? It was, what's
A group of people
that they did? What did that group of people do?
be mad and
They were mad, but what did they do? They made up what?
a war.
Not war, but they were making up all these what?
Bad soldiers.
Oh, who said it? Who said it?
Bad
Wars? No, who said it?
laws.
Laws. Yeah, they were making up laws and rules to try to make the colonists follow them and have control of them, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So just think about how all those pieces go together. So go ahead and turn to your, I think it is the second page of your packet right there. And we're going to talk about just that section. If you look on your second page, it's going to be the part where it says preparing to fight. That's what the one we're going to focus on. And there's a little bit of it on the second page. So go ahead and number your paragraphs real quick. This page, is it okay if I run a few minutes? So go ahead and number your paragraphs. And if you see, go ahead and number your paragraphs. If you see something important in there, like what, a lot of times when you have words that are in bold print or darker print, right? Doesn't that tell you that that's something important that you need to pay attention to? That's what I would do. So be sure that you take note of that, but be sure that you number just on the ones where we're talking about preparing to fight. Don't get into the other one. There you go. Okay, and so let's just talk about that a little bit. Get to mine real quick. Okay, so I want everybody to put your finger on the very first word, and that shows me that y'all are ready. Right, ready? You should have your finger right there on that first word on the paragraphs that are talking about preparing to fight. Okay, so at the same time, the Congress prepared for more fighting. John Adams of Massachusetts took the lead. Adams believed that the local, what was that?
Militia.
Militia. And who were the militia?
The Minutemen.
The Minutemen lost.
No,
The Minutemen.
The Minutemen. Y'all remember that. That's so good that y'all remembered that. Because that's another thing, the way that the word that they used to call the American militia, right, was the Minutemen. And why did they call them Minutemen? Why do y'all remember?
Because they were there in a minute.
That's right. They were prepared to fight at a minute's notice. That's so good. Y'all are doing such a good job. Okay, so let's continue following along. The militias were fine with fighting here and there, but to fight a war, though, they needed to create a real American army, an army of the United Colonies. So at the time, the members of Massachusetts militia were camped outside of Boston, and they were camped outside near the British soldiers. Those militiamen, they call them militiamen, but they are the Minutemen, said Adams, were ready to be the first soldiers in the new army. But who led Adams' army of the United Colonies? So we're going to learn about that. So how fortunate the Congress was that Adams continued to have the right for the job in that right man for the job in that very room. He was a man of great talents and great character. He was an experienced military leader from Virginia. So as Adams continued to speak, all eyes turned to the tall man dressed in old militia uniform. Standing in the back of the room, the man quickly turned and walked out. He wanted the delegates to be free and discuss him without him being present. That man was George Washington. Adams was right, and the other delegates agreed. Washington was the perfect man to lead the Continental Army as it had came to be called. He had gained his military experience in the French and Indian War, which I know y'all talked about that too. So after that, he returned to Mount Vernon, Virginia to run his plantation. He was a member of the Virginia House of Burgesses and a supporter of the Patriot cause. He was also among the best known and wealthiest men in the colonies. Everyone admired him for his devotion to duty, his cold head, and a strong will. Turn y'all's page. He was settled. He was a settled person. Washington could command the Continental Army and its troops, and he would be the Massachusetts militiamen camped around Boston. Okay. All right. So that leads us to we're talking about who it was that actually they chose to lead that army, because the militiamen were good for those little small battles, right? Yes, sir. Okay, well, don't mess with it, bud. So the militiamen or the Minutemen that they had were good for those little small battles that they could kind of, that they needed to kind of get themselves to the bigger war, but they needed somebody that was really trained and somebody that could lead a bigger army to win their freedom, because the war was going to be a bigger thing than the battle, right? All the individual battles. So those were little smaller things that happened throughout leading up to the Revolutionary War. So they needed somebody that was trained, and so they selected. We said, who was this?
George Washington.
That's right. So let's look at that question. How else do y'all know George Washington? What, when you hear his name, what does that make you think about? Oh, he was, which president was he? The very first one. Very good. So, and why do y'all think? Why do you think that they thought he was the best person for the job? What do you think?
Oh, because he had a trick up his sleeve.
He kind of probably did have tricks up his sleeves, but what was another thing, a reason?
Because one time he had lived in the war and he had great ideas.
He did have great ideas, but he was also what? What do you
He
think?
was also a soldier.
He was a soldier. That was the main thing, right? That he was a trained soldier. That's why they thought he was important, the person for the job, right? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next thing, okay? All right, so we talked about how the numbers of the army, and like if you were like the British or the I think that is, yeah, that's the British right there. So if you were the colonists that were going to fight on Bunker Hill, and you saw the army of the British, would you think that you would be afraid if you saw them coming?
Yeah.
You might would be afraid, right? Because they look pretty organized, don't they? Yeah, they look pretty organized, okay? So what do y'all think when we talk about what has happened so far in the war? What do y'all think that the Americans, how the Americans viewed themselves before? Let's talk about before. How do you think they viewed themselves before that battle?
I think they were already packed up for everything.
They were, well, do you think, but how do you think that they viewed themselves, like, or how do you think that they thought about themselves before they went into that battle of Bunker Hill? What do you think? View, that means how they thought about themselves. Like before they went to the battle. What do you think? They probably maybe was a little scared, and they maybe didn't really. Do you think that they thought that they were really very prepared for the war, or that they could win? Do you think that they thought that they maybe, or did they think, man, I'm not sure if we're prepared for this? Do you think that they thought that they were prepared to go to battle against Britain?
No.
Maybe not. So, but after, so let's talk about after and knowing what happened after the battle. Remember, British won, right? Isn't that the ones that won? The colonists didn't win. Britain did, right? So even though they didn't win after that battle, what do you think? What changed for the colonists? How do you think that they felt about themselves after that battle?
They were not prepared. They were nervous that they might die or not
Where?
survive.
Okay, but do you think maybe something changed from before to after in how they thought about themselves? So if they were kind of scared and a little bit nervous about going to this, remember, Britain had one of the biggest armies in the world at that time. So I would be a little scared, okay, and maybe fearful that a lot of the soldiers would get killed, and they didn't know if they were going to be successful, right? So they may not have been successful in that battle, but we wouldn't be sitting here today, right, if they weren't successful in the war, right? Because there wouldn't be a United States of America, or maybe it wouldn't have happened yet, okay? So after the fact, they probably thought that how do you think that they thought about themselves, or how do you think their ideas of themselves changed after? Do you think that maybe they had more confidence? Do you think, what do you think that they maybe thought about themselves, that maybe that they could do what?
They could fight the American militia.
Or you mean the
Minutemen.
the
Minutemen.
The
British?
British.
Yeah, 'cause remember we're talking about the colonists, right? Right. So I would think that afterwards they probably gained some more confidence, right, in themselves, and they thought maybe that they were able to get their freedom, right? Okay. So just keep those things in mind. So what I want y'all to do is look at this exit ticket that's in your packet. There's a few questions I want you to answer. Okay, so I'm going to give y'all a few minutes to do that, and then after you do that, right after that, I want you to do your little feedback thing. And all this is some things that I want you to maybe write down, and it doesn't always, they don't have to necessarily be in complete sentences. I just want to know some ideas that you learned or things that we talked about that you learned, maybe some fun things that you learned within the lesson, and one question you still have, okay? So do your exit ticket first, do that one first, and then do the other one, because the exit ticket's first, and right behind it is your feedback sheet. So I'm going to give y'all a few minutes to do that so we can wrap up our lesson, okay? All right? I'll let y'all go ahead and get started. Is that better? And be sure to write your name at the top of your exit ticket and your feedback sheet too, please. Remember, you can always refer back to your text that you have in your packet to help you remind you maybe some of the information that we talked about in the lessons. Oh, right here, bud. I bet you can go back over here and look. I bet you can find it.
conflicts that were going on. And then the big war, we haven't got to that yet, because that's going to be the Revolutionary War. That's going to come at the very end, right? We're still in that stage of we're still having these little conflicts. They're having these little conflicts, right? And then when we get in with this key, go to the other side. So just think about some things that, right there, some things that you want, things that you didn't know before you started your lesson, and what you learned when we talked about this. Answer, I would think. These are just your time to believe things that you might have so that you didn't know before we started classes. We'll give y'all a little bit more time and then we're going to wrap up. If you can't come up with 3, then at least 2. Try to at least come up with 2. But ideally, hopefully there should be at least 3 things that you can think of that happened, or that you learned that you didn't know before the lesson. Just think about what we talked about in the lesson and those things that were new to you once we started talking about our lesson. Do the other side. Yeah, do the other picture. Yeah, and be sure to put your name on it for me, please. Those are just 3 things that you learned that you didn't know before we started listening. And they don't have to be a coincidence. Just you can just like list some things that you learned that you didn't know before. Okay? Did you get the back page too? This one right here. Okay, so what do you think? What was something fun that was a fun fact? Something fun that in the lesson, and then one question that you still have. Write your name at the top, okay? Okay, listen. It's not just do the message. Something else, another thing that you knew that you was something that you didn't know before we started the lesson. Did you know about my rules before we started? Then that would be something new, wouldn't it? And you could write that. have your names. I want everybody to make sure you got your names on your packets and everything. Did anybody else have any questions or anything, like, about everything that we talked about? Is there, like, anything that, like, you want to ask before we totally conclude our lessons? When we think about what we talked about how the colonists were viewing themselves, right? And how the different battles and different things that happened, especially specifically Bunker Hill, right? That happened, and how it helped us to better understand how the colonists were feeling about what they could do to gain their freedom, right? Did you have a question? Okay, what's your question? Did the colonists or British? Both? No, the British had funnier accents, but they spoke English just like we do. Okay? All right, well, thank y'all so much. Just be sure y'all's names are on y'all's packets for me, and I appreciate y'all letting me teach this lesson, okay? Thank you.